The sun was high in the sky, casting golden beams through the tall glass windows of a sprawling mansion on the edge of the city. Inside, silence filled a grand study lined with shelves of books that looked untouched for years. But what drew attention wasn't the sunlight, nor the vast paintings that covered the walls. It was a single brown leather suitcase sitting on a polished oak desk. To an ordinary eye, it was just luggage. But inside, it carried a fortune, stacks of cash, more money than most men would see in a lifetime. And to the man who sat in the leather chair before it, a man whose face was hardened by decades of wealth and betrayal, it wasn't just money. It was a trap. It was a test. A test for someone he hardly knew, someone who had entered his world only weeks ago. What neither man realized was that this one decision, this single moment under the bright daylight, would change both their lives forever. Before we continue deeper into this story of temptation, sacrifice, and humanity, I want to pause here for a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of honesty to transform the world, then please take a second to like this video, comment below your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Together we can remind the world that goodness still exists. Now, let's return to the story. The millionaire's name was Charles Davenport. At 60, he had everything a man could dream of. Mansions, businesses, luxury cars, and influence that stretched across industries. But there was something he lacked, something money had never bought him: trust. Too many people had smiled at his face, only to stab him in the back. His closest friends had cheated him in business deals, employees had stolen from him, and even members of his family had lied for their own gain. Years of betrayal had made Charles cold and suspicious, convinced that everyone had a price. And so, when he hired a new personal driver, a man named Samuel, he thought it wise to test him before placing his faith in him. After all, in Charles's world, trust was more valuable than gold. Samuel was 55, and life had been nothing but an uphill battle for him. Once a factory worker, he had lost his job when the plant closed, and his wife soon after to an illness that left his pockets empty and his heart scarred. He carried himself with quiet dignity, though the lines on his face told a story of struggle and endurance. His graying hair was cropped short, his eyes tired yet gentle, and his hands bore the roughness of decades of labor. Samuel had a son, Daniel, who worked part-time at a mechanic's shop while trying to save for college. Their modest home had peeling paint on the walls, and their kitchen table was covered in bills that Samuel never seemed able to pay. Yet, in all his hardship, Samuel never allowed himself to abandon honesty. His late wife's words echoed in him always: "Even if the world strips you of everything, never let it take your integrity." On a warm afternoon, Charles decided to carry out his test. He instructed Samuel to drive him to a quiet countryside property, far away from the bustling city. The sunlit road stretched endlessly, bordered by golden fields that swayed in the breeze. The car glided smoothly, its polished black body gleaming under the bright sky. Samuel kept his eyes on the road, his posture steady, his silence dignified. When they reached the estate, Charles stepped out, his phone pressed to his ear as he pretended to take a call. He left behind the leather suitcase on the back seat, deliberately unlatched so its contents would catch the driver's eye. Samuel walked around to adjust the rear door, as was his habit whenever Charles left something inside. But when his gaze fell upon the open suitcase, he froze. Staring back at him were stacks of $100 bills, neatly arranged, enough to erase every hardship in his life. The sunlight poured through the car window, catching the edges of the bills and making them gleam like treasure. His breath caught in his throat. His hand trembled as he reached toward it, not out of greed but of desperation. For a brief, dangerous moment, Samuel imagined what life could be if he simply took one bundle. He pictured paying off the medical debts left behind by his wife, clearing the bills stacked on the table, and securing his son's future. But then he remembered. He remembered his wife's frail voice in her final days, her hand gripping his as she whispered, "Promise me, Samuel, don't ever sell your soul." The words pierced him like sunlight cutting through a storm. His hand, once shaking, now steadied. He carefully closed the suitcase, clicked it shut, and placed it exactly where it had been. His reflection in the car's window stared back at him. Not a poor man tempted by money, but a man rich in principles. His chest rose as he drew a deep breath, and though his body remained weary, his soul was at peace. Charles, standing outside under the clear sky, watched everything through the glass. His piercing eyes had been trained to notice the smallest flickers of dishonesty. But what he saw shook him. Samuel had been given the perfect opportunity to betray him, to take what wasn't his, to surrender to desperation. Yet Samuel did the unthinkable. He chose honesty. For the first time in years, Charles felt something stir within him, a quiet admiration, a sense of faith that he thought had long died inside his heart. The drive back was silent, the road glowing under the afternoon sun. Samuel focused on the road, unaware of the storm of thoughts brewing in his employer's mind. Charles couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing Samuel's reflection, the way he closed the suitcase, the tears in his eyes as he resisted temptation. It was a mirror Charles had not expected to face. The following morning, Charles called Samuel into his study. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, flooding the room with warmth. On the desk lay the same suitcase, locked and intact. Samuel stood humbly, uncertain and nervous, while Charles pushed it across the desk toward him. Samuel's heart raced. He feared he was about to be accused of theft, his honesty misunderstood. But instead, Charles spoke words that would forever alter Samuel's life. He told him the suitcase was his, not because he had taken it, but because he hadn't. Samuel's knees nearly buckled. He tried to refuse, but Charles insisted. "You have shown me something no one has in years," Charles said softly. "You have reminded me that there are still men in this world whose integrity is not for sale. And for that, you deserve not just this money, but a chance to rebuild the life the world has stripped from you." From that day forward, everything changed. Charles paid off Samuel's debts, funded Daniel's education, and even gave Samuel part ownership in one of his smaller companies, allowing him to earn with dignity. But the greatest gift was not money. It was the friendship that grew between them. Charles, who had lived surrounded by liars, finally found a man he could trust. And Samuel, who had lived weighed down by struggle, discovered that honesty, though costly in the moment, is always rewarded in ways one cannot imagine. The golden sunlight that had once revealed Samuel's temptation now shone on him as a man redeemed, a man who had proven that integrity is the greatest wealth. Their lives, once worlds apart, were now bound together not by money, but by trust. If this story touched your heart, I ask you with sincerity, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support allows us to continue bringing real, emotional stories that remind the world of the power of honesty and kindness. Before we end, I have one special request for you. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done if you were in Samuel's place? Your thoughts may inspire someone else fighting their own battles today. And remember, in the brightness of day or in the darkest of nights, money can buy comfort, but only integrity can buy peace.